and want to welcome everyone to our communities of practice. And thank you for joining on today. Today we have a great topic on IRTs, and we have some wonderful presenters who are going to be talking about integrated resource teams. So we're looking forward to that. I was just sharing earlier that today is an unusual weather event day in Arkansas. We have Hurricane Laura making landfall here. So
Wow.
a lot of things have been canceled. School has been let out early. Banks are closing. So it's just another way to see 2020 a year of unusual events. With that being said, thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us and join with us on this topic. And I want to start with our roll call as we normally do. And we'll go through our states so that we can report out to RSA participation levels from each of our communities. So we'll start first with California. Anyone else from California?
Yes, good morning. This is Maria Gary in California.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Robin. Priscilla Varela from California.
Hello, thanks for joining. Next is Illinois.
Hi, Quinetta Grant from Illinois.
Hi, Quinetta.
There.
All right, next is Kentucky.
Christina Bard from Kentucky.
Hello.
Tony Perry with Kentucky OVR.
Nancy Tapley with Kentucky OVR.
Thank you all for joining. Next, we have Louisiana. I'd be surprised if Louisiana is on. Not hearing any. Let's move to Montana. All right, what about New Hampshire? Hey, Carla, you're muted, but we see you.
Hi, everybody. Carla Smith, New Hampshire.
Anyone else? New Hampshire? New Jersey is next.
Lane Katz, New Jersey.
Hello, from the New Jersey shore. What about New Mexico?
Reyes Gonzalez from New Mexico.
Thanks for being on. And North Carolina is next.
There we go. It's Angie McCormick from North Carolina.
Hello. All right. Next is Oregon. What about South Carolina? All right, Virginia.
Donna's here.
Hi, Donna. Anyone I missed? Any partners who want to introduce themselves?
I wasn't sure if you heard me. Angie McCormick, North Carolina.
Hey, Angie. Thanks for being on.
I wasn't sure if you heard me because it didn't sound like you did.
I did. I got your name down. Thanks for being on. Anyone else that I missed or didn't hear? All right. Well, again, welcome, welcome, welcome. And we're going to turn it over to John Walsh, and he's going to present and lead us in our discussion today on IRTs. Thank you, John.
All right, great. Now, Robin, I could share my screen. Can you give me permission to share?
Yes. Let's see. Does that help? Did that work?
It did. Great. Perfect. And folks see the PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. Okay. Hi, folks. Thank you, Robin, for giving us this opportunity to talk a little bit about what's happening around implementing the integrated resource team, or as we call it, the IRT model, in 4 of our state projects as part of E3. My name is John Walsh, and I'm the project manager for E3, and I work out of Southern University. And as Robin mentioned, my heart goes out to my colleagues in Baton Rouge and folks in New Orleans and on the Texas coast as they're dealing with Hurricane Laura. So, hopefully all is well with them and they're all safe. I'm also joined by Brian Ingram from the National Disability Institute. Brian is part of our E3 team, and he's providing training, coaching, and other supports to help us implement the IRT model in Oregon and New Mexico. And also I'm joined by DJ Ralston from George Washington University, also a member of our E3 team. She's been our real project leader and thought leader around developing training resources and adapting the integrated resource team model for the work that we're really doing in our states throughout the country. And last but not least, I really want to give a big thanks to Donna Martin. Donna is a manager out of the Martinsville, Virginia office of the Virginia Division of Rehabilitation Services. And we kind of reached out to Donna on the last minute. And she was very gracious to join us and be willing to talk a little bit about all the great work that's happening in her area of Virginia and the state as a whole. And she's been a real E3 influencer and leader in impacting positive change with her organization. She's been a wonderful partner. So thank you for all of you joining us to do this presentation. So a little bit of just housekeeping. The presentation, anything we do with E3, we just want to remind folks that this comes from funding from the U.S. Department of Education, Rehabilitation Services Administration. And we are currently in the last year of our funding under this grant, although we are confident that we will have a no-cost extension that allow us to go into a 6th year of the project. Any of the ideas, opinions, or conclusions expressed today, however, are those of the presenters and do not represent recommendations, endorsements, or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. So we're going to split up this presentation. Brian's going to kind of kick us off by giving us a kind of a brief overview of the integrated resource team model, what it is not, and then we're going to provide you some updates on 4 of the state projects that are implementing the model. Now, when we do that, I would love if some of the folks can jump in too from those states, like Nancy, Tony, and Christina from Kentucky. Reyes has joined us from New Mexico. So please feel free, as we talk a little bit about those state-specific projects, to jump in. Donna and DJ are going to give us a more detailed description of what is occurring in the project in Virginia and some of the benefits and outcomes they've seen from implementing the model. And then towards the very end of the presentation, we hope we can have a discussion and some questions about what's happening in those programs. Before I turn it over to Brian, I just wanted to kind of go back to our core purpose of Project E3. As you all know, our real mission is to provide technical assistance around reducing barriers for folks with disabilities that are living in disadvantaged communities to more fully participate in VR programs. And ultimately, we also hope improving their employment outcomes. We have found through our projects in 24 communities in the 12 states that we are serving that in many of those communities, there are pretty significant resource gaps that exist. And I would even venture to say, in light of some of the economic downturn we're seeing as a result of the pandemic, that some of those resource gaps have even worsened over in the past year. And we have found that utilizing the IRT model can be a way to address some of those resource gaps and as a way to coordinate service provision and leverage some of those other services in your community. Just as a recap, where does the IRT come from? The IRT model was based on a successful emerging practice that really came out of the Disability Program Navigator Initiative and its successor, the Disability Employment Initiative. And we like to think that we adopted that model and adapted it some to really be usable within Project D3. I really think at the heart, though, of the IRT model, it's a methodology, or it's a way to really develop that collaborative, coordinated service strategy amongst state VR agencies, CRPs, community-based organizations, and coordinate that service strategy. So you're getting more comprehensive services for the folks you're serving. And again, with the ultimate goal of improving outcomes for folks in those communities and hopefully improving their situation so they have a pathway out of poverty. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Brian. And Brian, whenever you want me to go to the next slide, just say next slide and I'll move us through. And Brian, you're on mute.
Excellent point, John. Thank you for letting me know that, and hello. And thank you for letting me speak today. So today we're going to talk about the integrated resource team of the IRT. And we're going to start with a pretty obvious question. What is an IRT? An integrated resource team is a client-level resource coordination strategy that Vera Council can use without the necessity of any larger agreements being put in place between systems. So that's one way of looking at it. It's an informal resource coordination strategy that is customized to meet the needs of one client. It brings together a team of diversified service providers, which could be almost anybody, including partner agencies, core partners, who are going to work together with the individual consumer to come up with a strategy on how services can be coordinated to reach an employment goal. So the teams are individualized based on the needs and the goal of the client. The counselor acts as the catalyst with the client to put these teams together. They are convened based on the authority of the client. So they're services that the client is either engaged in or is referred to by the counselor. So that the consumer, along with the team of service providers, are going to get together and they're going to try to establish consensus on three main points. Consumer identified, mutually agreed upon employment goal. First of all, the whole IRT is built around that employment goal, and it is kind of the primary piece. Secondly, they're going to speak two lines of communication. What types of communication are needed? What types of communication is the consumer comfortable with? And who is going to facilitate this communication? What are you going to talk about? Who's going to talk about it? When do they need to know? And finally, they're going to talk about a sequence of services. One of the things about an IRT is that we always say is that it doesn't create one big super plan. What it does is it tries to align the existing service plans that a consumer is engaged in. So one of the ways of aligning this plan is to look at the sequence of services. Who's providing which services, when, and when do these services stop? Okay, if you can advance it. Along those lines, an IRT is an informal agreement between the consumer and the systems providing services to that consumer. And it allows the members of the team to coordinate at the consumer level around a shared employment goal. So pretty much what I was just talking about. Some of the benefits that we've seen to this approach is that it really does promote greater cross-systems collaboration, education, and accountability of all the parties involved in the IRT, including the consumer. One of the things is that if everybody knows what everybody's doing, things tend to happen in a way that is more predictable. I'll just put it that way. The other thing about IRTs that we always like to state, although we hope people know this, is that all the members of the IRT, all the providers at the table, can collectively gain credit for the outcome when it occurs. So that's another important point of the IRT. The point is that if all of these providers that are working with a consumer get together and align their service plans, what they can come up with is a strategy that is richly resourced and can attempt to address multiple challenges simultaneously in a coordinated way. And by doing this, they're going to give the consumer the opportunity not just to be successful, but perhaps to reach a much more substantial employment goal than they would be able to do if the services weren't coordinating in this way. Next slide, please. So what an IRT is not. A lot of times there's a little confusion when you first introduce the concept of an integrated resource team. And so we like to clarify right up front that an IRT is an approach that's used for an individual consumer. It's not an interagency committee that gets together to talk about systems level concerns. Now, IRTs can certainly inform an interagency committee, and an IRT might be able to take advantage of an interagency committee that exists. But an IRT is formed around a single consumer to reach that employment goal. Secondly, the main purpose of an IRT is employment. It is that employment goal. It's not about resource mapping, and it's not about educating the consumer about various resource options, although those things may happen within the context of an IRT. The main point here is that it's going to be focused on that employment goal. So you're talking about resources with that consumer in relation to the goal. Okay, next slide, please.
All right, so at this point, Brian, I was going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that we actually have the integrated resource team as part of our technical assistance efforts. So currently, we have IRT implementation pilots in 4 states out of the 12 that we're serving through E3, Virginia, Kentucky, New Mexico, and Oregon. Now, currently in Kentucky, they have 2 targeted communities, and their primary focus group of consumers they're working with are students or transition age youth with developmental disabilities and or specific sensory impairments, and individuals with a mental health diagnosis. We also found that with the Kentucky project, they were particularly impacted by COVID-19. With the high levels of claims for unemployment benefits because of the economic downturn, we found that some of the lead counselors in the project were reassigned to deal with those organizational issues. And so we took a step back, we suspended the project, and I'm happy to report that just this month, there has been communication to resume the project. Nikki Pallas, who is also works with the National Disability Institute and is also part of our E3 team, is working with the folks in Kentucky to get this restarted. And I believe some of the efforts that were talked about were kind of, let's do a refresher training on what the IRT model is. Let's start looking at how do we support the counselors involved to start identifying some of their clients in which they could create IRTs, and then kind of support that initial setup of the IRT meetings, whether that is maybe less likely in person and maybe more likely remotely in this new environment of providing services through distance provisions, whether that's over the phone or Zoom. I invite anyone from Kentucky who would want to add anything to your particular project. I see Tony shaking his head that seems to capture it.
Yeah, it does, John. And we will be starting next week with both of our Kentucky regions. And so we'll be doing that refresher. We had one region that was certainly further along and had already started some casework. But just the refresher, I think, will be helpful for everybody. And then we'll be moving forward from there. We're excited to get started and continue that work even past the end of the fiscal year.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you, Christina.
I would also like to add that all the counselors who got reassigned to work for the unemployment office are all now back with Voc Rehab. So
That's
we're
great
happy
to hear
about that.
too. Yes, we're a big hooray. That's awesome. We've had to make some major shifts with what was occurring with the pandemic, and it's good to hear that some of that is kind of returning to some level of normalcy. So that's a good news. The project that I have the honor and pleasure to work as the lead for is the New Mexico project. And we actually have targeted communities in Albuquerque, which is the largest urban area in New Mexico, and also Deming, which is in the southwestern part of the state and is a much more rural area of the state. And with that particular project, we're working with folks that have a mental health and/or substance abuse diagnosis. And I know Reyes is on this call as well. So Reyes, if you want to jump in after I go over the slide, please just, if I miss anything, and Brian as well. Brian has worked as the lead in this project and working with lead counselors in Albuquerque and Deming to really provide ongoing coaching. We've done, before the pandemic, we had the opportunity to do some in-person training. We were able to do a community academy within Albuquerque. Unfortunately, we were never able to launch an academy within the Deming region. That was our replication site. We are further along probably in the Albuquerque project than we are in the Deming project. We recently brought on a new partner within Albuquerque. HopeWorks is a community-based organization that has worked with us since the inception of the project. But recently, Casa de Phoenix, which is a residential program they run for individuals with substance abuse and mental health issues who are also homeless, they have up to 28 individuals living with them for 1 year. It's a residential program that deals with sobriety, getting folks stability around a mental health condition, and then also preparing them for work. And so we're trying to implement the RT model also at that training facility that would also loop in folks from New Mexico DVR and also the workforce program, which is called New Mexico Workforce Solutions. So we have been doing a lot of online training and coaching with those folks from Casa de Phoenix. And we're hoping within the next few months that we can increase our participation of other folks within the workforce development system. And also looking at ways to effectively do remote integrated resource teams. Brian or Reyes, was there anything additional?
This is Reyes, and I'd like to thank you, E3, for all your work you've done. You helped us forge relationships with our other partners, specifically Casa de Phoenix and HopeWorks, and also with our workforce partners. Unfortunately, we started this off right around the time of COVID. So our Title I and Title III partners, we got really busy with the unemployment situation. But in the meantime, we've established a closer relationship with HopeWorks. Right now, it's a pilot with a couple of counselors. And the most important thing to me is that we're developing relationships. It's been slow but sure with workforce. They have a lot of competing priorities, but we're headed in the right way. Our operator attended the E3 Academy in New Orleans with me, and she's bought into this whole process. So that's been a good thing. And a byproduct of this is we develop an online referral system. So that's been good to track these individuals. And let me see. I guess that's it off the top of my head. I'll let Brian comment.
Oh, I don't have that much to add, except that I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with some of your counselors, Reyes. And I just want to say, you know, through all the COVID craziness, they've kind of stuck with us, John. And it is a challenging environment to work in. But everybody is kind of got their nose to the grindstone. And we're moving forward on our first IRTs. And we're in the active resource coordination phase, which is the first phase where you're connecting the clients up with the resources and putting the teams together. And it's happening. And so it's really good to hear, Reyes, And I just wanted to give you that feedback while I had the opportunity.
And I mentioned New Mexico is also on a order selection. So we do have a wait list for a lot of our clients that aren't most significantly disabled. But I think with our information referral, we've been able to make some recommendations for the other workforce partners. Luckily, Casa de Phoenix is a shelter. They have access to computers there, because what I really noticed with COVID is the digital divide. And we're having a hard time doing outreach to any clients that don't have computers. And in New Mexico, that's quite a few. So luckily, the Casa de Phoenix is providing the computers where we can make that contact. Because right now, all state offices are working virtually. That includes workforce and the vocational rehabilitation program. So that's been a challenge.
And Reyes, I appreciate those additional words, and I echo Brian's sentiments that we did face a lot of challenges, as I'm sure a lot of states did, in adapting your service delivery model. And there's a lot of creativity out there and a lot of persistence to make sure that folks were getting served even in difficult situations. So it's great to be part of that that community that responds in that way.
And as per our last meeting, we're actually able to get our benefits counseling team involved, at least with general counseling, with HopeWorks, to kind of explain benefits in a general sense. That way, while we're on wait list, they can research other programs and know about their benefits and work on their soft skills and job readiness skills.
Yeah, that's a great segue too, Reyes, because one of the pieces we're also doing in collaboration with the Title I program and Title III program through the New Mexico Workforce Connections is they're actually looking to develop someone to serve in the role as a benefits advisor. So they're actually committing some of their resources to develop the training in order to assist, because DVR does have benefit advisors as part of their staff. There's 5 of them throughout the state. But as one could imagine, 5 is probably enough to meet the need. So New Mexico Workforce Connection is looking to increase that capacity by 1 within Albuquerque. And we know that about at least 25% of the folks that are a part of Casa de Phoenix are on some type of Social Security benefits. And that could be a barrier to them really seeking employment if they think they're going to lose their benefits or medical insurance. So having that kind of proper benefit advisement is so critical. Brian, I know that you have been working very closely with the folks in Oregon, and the main areas that we're working with in Oregon are the Medford region and the Bend region of the state. And in particular, we're working with students who are transitioned age, 14 to 24, and who are living in rural and remote communities and have specific sensory impairments like deafblindness or blindness. And also working, the second group is working with folks over the age of 24 that have similar disabilities. Brian, you want to talk a little bit about Medford and Bend?
Certainly. Thanks, John. So Medford is a town in Southern Oregon, which, by the way, is my state. So even though I can't leave my house, I'm familiar with them. We've made some progress. We built on some of the work that DJ did earlier. We started in Medford with a community academy. And after that, we identified a lead counselor. And we have been putting together a caseload with this counselor, Jane. And we have again begun with the active resource coordination. So we're moving into actually doing some IRTs in this region. And it's pretty exciting. Jane is a very, very competent counselor and a joy to work with. And in Medford, things seem to be moving pretty quickly in spite of COVID, you know, as in the face of COVID as well. Bend is a slightly different story. The Bend office was sort of overwhelmed by COVID. And because we're working with the Oregon Commission for the Blind, these are pretty small offices. So there's not a lot of staff there. And the staff person that we were working with really just kind of felt like she didn't have the bandwidth to continue with this. So we're working with management to try to solve this problem. But currently, we're kind of on hiatus there. We do hope to resume soon. And once we resume, we can engage quickly and thoroughly and try to get them to where Medford's at. So there you go. If anything gets done, you're pretty.
Thank you, Brian. And then now, last but not least, we wanted to talk a little bit about Virginia. So if I could turn this over to DJ and then Donna.
Sure, thanks, John. Thanks, Brian. Great to hear about the stuff that's going on around the country. So I'm going to be pretty brief here. I have had the privilege of working with Donna Martin since, Donna, what are we thinking? Like, I think it was like August of, I want to say 2017 was the first time I came to Martinsville.
I think so.
That was that seems like a really long time ago. In Virginia, we were actually working in two areas. The first of which is Donna Martin's area, which is in Martinsville and Henry County, which is down in the, I would call it the southwestern, but apparently it's not quite that west, but it's not far from North Carolina. I can tell you because I used to fly into North Carolina and drive right up. And I actually feel like I could almost live in Martinsville because I can get myself around without the GPS anymore, right? But so Martinsville was our first place, and our second site in Virginia was the Hampton Roads region, or the Tidewater area, which included Norfolk, Portsmouth, Hampton, and Newport News. Unfortunately, Margie Milner, who's one of the managers in that area, was not able to join us today because it was kind of late notice. But I can kind of give a little bit of an update or fill in some holes around that site after we hear from Donna. The two targeted populations in Virginia that we were looking at were persons with drug abuse dependence and or persons with mental health. And that was by design. Yes, we do realize that there's comorbidity there. We were hoping that we'd have greater impact. So John, I'll let you advance the slides for Donna. Donna, do you want me to talk through this, or do you want to talk through, you can at least talk through the Martinsville side. I'll get to the Hampton Road side later.
All right, sure. So for us, we were sort of at an advantage, I think, because we already had a core group of agencies that got together once a month called the Martinsville Area Disability Employment Network. And we built more of collaboration by pulling in some other folks to that and using that as our advisory council. And then the training sort of came out around that group. And never fails. Somebody calls right in the middle of a presentation. Are you still there?
We thought we lost you for a minute, Donna.
I don't know. It's all these political calls. Sorry. So we got started and had a lot of training at first. And I think looking back, we would have rearranged some of our training, but some of the best training was the motivational interviewing and getting that out to all our partners. And one of the other pieces that came into play and was really good was the community academy training, where everybody learned a little bit about each other, which you think you know, but then we welcomed so many new folks to that academy that we found out about a lot of other resources that were out, which was nice. But in using this model, and I think we were at an advantage because we did get all the training and all the components pre-pandemic, so that was nice. And we started doing IRTs, and there's some growing pains. It's kind of hard, and we're still struggling with getting our individuals to lead the meetings. That's still something they're shy about, or they're just not always comfortable with, but we're working on that. I think a lot of the folks now know the difference in ARC and IRT. Somebody called me the other day and said, we're having this IRT meeting with this new person over at the middle college, and we're gonna have the GED folks there and talk more. And anyway, the I said, well, it's not. And he said, I know it's not an IRT. This was the person from college. He said, I know it's an ARC. So it was kind of funny to hear him say that after a couple of years. Everybody knows it. But you see our stat there where we have so many customers that have done well in employment, and we have really embraced and been doing the active IRTs. It's not for everyone, but for the ones that need it. And this is something, DJ, I didn't tell you about when we talked Monday, but I just got an email this morning about our WIOA goals scorecard for the whole state for the performance year 19, and we rocked it out. And we are way above, all our stats and our goals in our office for the goal attainment, our 1 year stability for people still working. Our office is the highest in the New River at 58.5%. And our goal was 45. So we went above it, and we're actually green in every area, and we're the only office in our area that is. So I think that speaks to the use of IRT helping make folks more successful.
That was amazing for all of you guys that just got to witness that. Like, I'm smiling so big right now. It's awesome to hear. It's been such a privilege, Donna, to work with you and your office and your staff. And I know we have a few more slides, but I just wanted to kind of comment on the difference between active resource coordination and the integrated resource team. And Brian, you also feel free to jump in here as one of the, the godfathers of the IRT here. The active resource coordination, folks, is normally the phase that is kind of that coordination and connection phase. And we talk about it sometimes in the context as within information and referral, but it's not information and referral. It's a lot different than that. And Donna and her staff can talk about the fact that it is a bit labor intensive. We don't lie about that. But in the end, it does actually end up saving time. But the active resource coordination is the key kind of, it really is actually the foundation of the IRT, because it's the engagement and the negotiation with these other systems. And sometimes what we have learned over the years is that consumers have a hard time navigating those systems. Why would we not expect that, right? Because if we think about it, even all of us as professionals who have worked in these fields, we don't know what everybody does, yet somehow we're expecting our consumers to figure that out and navigate all of that. And we clearly figured out that's not going to work. So, active resource coordination became kind of the linchpin within this integrated resource team model. And I feel like we had some good learning lessons, Donna, about like how we separate out and talk about it versus the IRT, and helping folks feel comfortable using active resource coordination and knowing that you could potentially even call a meeting that is more of an active resource coordination meeting because you don't necessarily have that employment goal nailed down yet in the context of your IPE. And so, but helping everybody to understand it really is a process, and process is okay, because in the end, process gets you to where you're going. So I don't know if Brian or Donna wanted to add anything.
Oh, just that, I mean, it's an important lesson, and it's good to hear, Donna, that your staff can distinguish it, because the active resource coordination is kind of the first half of the process. The meeting is middle, or maybe even a little beyond the middle, right? The IRT meeting itself, right? And it's, as DJ was saying, it's where most of the work lies. So, yeah, I'm just concurring.
Yes.
And Donna, I don't want to interrupt, but I wanted to echo as well. So you're also talking about impact on performance metrics on top of what you're experiencing, and getting metrics that are showing all in the green. And so seeing that change where you can go back to your administration and say, look at the changes that are impacting based on implementing this model within my office, and how
very
this
impressive.
And as Brian had mentioned in his presentation, these outcomes could also help other partners within the workforce development system that can also maybe get some of those positive outcomes if they're co-involved with your particular clients.
Exactly. You segued nicely to my other slides if you want to go through them kind of a little bit. that's exactly it. We are finding ourselves with so many more people in need now. And I think if you're smart, you know you don't have enough funding to do it all for every person. So if we can share our resources and still help a person move forward, that's certainly the goal. Go on forward. And of course, taking time to just focus on that one person. I think it may have been Brian talking earlier about how it's not a group that's got a systemic focused overall goal. You got to focus in on that one person and their job goal, move forward. And recognize every program does have different individual things that they're trying to get at. And when we look around at our community partners, not everybody we're working with is about employment like VR is, but almost everybody that comes to the table now completely believes that employment is a piece of their program as well, because it helps the folks so much if they're working. So the folks that come to the IRTs and are willing now to do it because they've seen some other folks benefit from it has been really huge. And for us, we often have worked the longest with the person we're bringing to the table for the IRT. So it's just sort of natural. We end up taking the lead somewhat to kind of make sure things are happening. Virtually, it's been a lot more challenging since this started. But I think, again, we had a little bit more of a leg up on some of our technology and some of the things we already had in place to be able to coordinate and make sure things are going smoothly and send stuff out. The examples, if you want to go on to the next slide, that I brought today are just real recent. The counselor actually sent me these last week about her success stories, and she actually had set up transition exit meetings in May in our area. COVID, we still had no cases in May in our area of the state of Virginia. And so the teachers were actually still at the schools. The students weren't in school, but they were there setting up some meetings, and Ms. Cooley was able to do some planning and had the students that were graduating meet up, and she called the WIOA partner that she knew had this new program, the Guided Career Exploration Program, and had her on the conference phone, and ended up with these 3 students that have been so successful in this program this summer. And if you go to the next slide, this was an email update just last week about how well all 3 of those students are doing in their jobs, and so excited about what they're doing. And if you want to go on to the next one, I think it's cool because there's the stuff that we love to see, which is pictures of happy folks, you know, where they're working and what they're doing. They are getting paid, and they love this work. And the next slide shows some of the comments from our person and our partner. And this is just what we do this work for, to be able to get success and have everybody tell us things, especially when a customer says, I made new friends, I got to work in groups, I got to learn and do things. I got a job in my future, I like it, it's very exciting. So you just can't beat when you get feedback like that. And just to kind of sum up, for me, sometimes it's hard, you know, when an IRT works, that's great. An example I always think back on and kind of kick myself was one that I missed, a missed opportunity of an IRT. Do I have time to talk about that? Or do you want to move on?
I think we're getting a little close, Donna. I really appreciate, but I think we've got about 40 minutes for this presentation.
Okay. No problem. I get excited and I like to talk, you know.
I can tell, and that's what's awesome, Donna, is you do have a passion for this, and that's great.
So as mentioned, like through the privilege that I had of working with Donna and also Margie, who couldn't be with us in the other area of the state, we've learned a lot, and there's been and their great work actually has demonstrated the value of the integrated resource team and kind of the whole way that we went about building and implementing that within their communities has demonstrated the value of that to their state leadership, who were very insistent that as part of this project's wrap up that there would be some type of statewide implementation. So we designed, we of course had this all set to be all done in person, but then COVID, which seems to be pretty consistent theme today. Like, and Robin, I think goes all the way back to the beginning of our conversation about 2020 being really something. You're kind, because I refer to it as a dumpster fire. In any case, we are doing the best that we can in 2020, and we, as part of our statewide implementation, we basically solicited applications for E3 influencers, and we have a cadre of 33 folks from around the state of Virginia. We're doing 6 virtual training sessions, each that are 2 hours. We're about halfway through at this point. This virtual training series kind of mirrors actually the implementation that we looked at, and also incorporate some of the things that we learned along the way from working with Donna and from working in the Tidewater region. So we're halfway through this. The next thing that actually we'll be talking to that group about is the integrated resource team doing the theory and overview, and that's scheduled for next Tuesday for that group. They're a great group. I'm super excited to be working with them, and we'll be continuing for at least the first quarter of the new federal fiscal year, and providing some remote support and consultation as they look to implement some of the things they're learning through this statewide implementation series. John?
All right, so I think we're right up on time, but Robin, do we have time for a few questions?
Absolutely.
All right. All right. So thank you, Donna. Thank you, DJ. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for Reyes for your additional comments, and Christina. It's been great that folks can talk a little bit about how the project impacting folks are working for in their states. We're really looking forward to continuing our work in these states. As DJ had mentioned, with the no cost extension, we're going to move into at least part of a 6-year with working with some of these states, so we continue progress, including Kentucky, Oregon, New Mexico, and Virginia. So thank you for allowing this opportunity. And Robin, I turn it back to you.
Well, John, I do have one question. And Robin, do we have time to see the missed opportunity that Donna had?
That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, no pressure, huh? We had just started having IRTs and had had a couple of successful meetings, and I had had a young man come in to see me. He'd been a long-term client that had just recently finished college, and he'd been in college for several years. Throughout, I'd tried to encourage him to work and get some work experience, but he always resisted because he had this family business of washing cars. So that's what he always did. So here he is out of college, and we all know college does not equal job. But, and that's what he was finding. He wasn't finding a job. So he came to me so we could sit down and think of a plan and decide what to do next. And I was in a hurry. I had a lot of stuff going on, and I thought to myself, you know, maybe IRT, you know what? I can just refer him over to my WIOA partner. That'll work just as easy. So, that's what I did. I said, you need to go see Martha, and this is what I have in mind. And I kind of shot a message over to Martha. She said, okay. Later, I saw the business developer, and I said, I'm thinking about this employer for my guy. And he said, all right, I'll reach out. And what finally happened there is that the employer at the time, the developer he didn't have an opening. My guy didn't take the WIA partner all the stuff that she needed, and she didn't ever tell me that, you know, that wasn't ever conveyed back. And eventually the employer did call and say, hey, I could use him. I had somebody quit. but we didn't have everything ready. He wasn't enrolled yet with WIOA. So I think we missed sitting together and just everybody hearing the same thing and kind of knowing what we needed to do to make that work. And I think looking back, you know, if we'd done that differently, I think he would have understood it. He would have bought into it more, as would have WIOA and everybody. So that was just, he ended up working, he got something. It was just the family circus where they went the long way instead of the straight way. So.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, John and DJ, Brian, and Christina Reyes, everyone that shared about the integrated resource team. It's great information, great to see the impact that it's making. So thank you for that. Any follow-up questions from anyone? We do want to share before we close out today that coming up for this fall, we will be planning a Leadership Academy 2.0. It will be a virtual Leadership Academy. So if you have thoughts or suggestions, we know that you all participated in a survey. We got your feedback on breakout sessions, trainings that will be included in that. So we're looking forward to planning that. But one of the big driving forces for the Leadership Academy will be sustainability. So I'm looking forward to hearing back from you on how we can help through this Leadership Academy with your sustainability efforts in your local communities. So if you have some thoughts, ideas, or things you want to see in this virtual training that'll come up later this fall, would love to hear back from you on what you can use for your communities, what information, what training really stood out to you that you really think could help with sustainability in your local communities. In fact, we have a few minutes now if anyone wants to talk about that or share ideas and suggestions.
For us, everyone so embraced the Community Academy that that's something we're going to revisit every October, since that's the Disability Awareness Month. We said that was something that we could easily continue to do, where we share information, because everybody's got a new program or something going on, and just being able to stand up and do that elevator speech for 2 minutes, share your info, just it's good reminders for everybody.
Thank you.
We actually, and Donna, just to share, we actually did one of those virtually in the Tidewater region with Margie and her group. So, because, you know, the fun of a community academy is normally that it's a big group of people, hopefully, and COVID days don't necessarily allow that. So it requires a little bit more of a lift, but what we did is we actually, in the context of the registration, collected all the information, which was a learning lesson from your community academies that we now do. So that the information gets collected like in the registration. But then we, as part of the TA effort, actually consolidated all of it into one PowerPoint so that there would be like one slide per agency or per program. And then as we circled through Zoom, that slide would show, and we still had the Oscars music ready to play if people started to talk too long on their one slide. So, I mean, like from a virtual standpoint, you could actually still run a community academy. And we broke people into breakout rooms to accomplish the speed dating, which wasn't quite as fun as like the really loud kind of thing that happens in the context of speed dating in person, but it still works within Zoom. So there's definitely some ways to do that. So if you want to, yeah, I'll call you.
Well, it sounds like a good topic for this virtual leadership academy too, DJ. So is the community academy, is that, how long of the training is that?
To actually train people on it, we just did that probably, like we could probably do that like in an hour, like train people on how to do it in an hour. I just did it for the E3 influencers in Virginia, and it was like 2 hours, but I had 2 hours to do it, but I think we could probably condense it if we needed to.
Right. We'll be looking forward to including that in the Virtual Leadership Academy 2.0 going forward. Thank you, Donna, for that suggestion. Anyone else on sustainability, what you would like to see for the upcoming conference, topics or things that would help ensure that the good work you've already started through Project E3 continues after grant funding has ended? Think about it. Cassandra, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I was just referring to the September the 18th virtual conference that we're doing. A lot of the topics there, I think, might be something to look at that are being presented, you know, related to, it might, you know, cause us to think about some, you know, some sustainability, you know, areas, some of the topics that have been presented on that day.
I think that's a good point. Yes, let's look at some cultural sensitivity training to include for sustainability efforts. So we'll include that. Looking forward to participating in that. Do you want to tell us a little bit more before we close out about that training in case people have missed it? It's September 18th.
Yes, we looked at the three areas, you know, empowerment, uh, and the three areas that Project E3 looks at, employment, and right now I'm having a brain freeze because of teaching so many classes. I'm sorry.
Education.
Education.
Yes, education. And what we did was we put a conference together related to those topics, and it's called Embracing Diverse Communities. And we have an all-day virtual conference that focuses on the mission of the grant. And we pretty much have speakers related to those three areas, and it's really coming together quite well. And we just, you know, spreading the word about everyone coming in and joining us. And we have the community involved. We have several VR agencies involved, and we have even consumers are involved with some of the planning from VR and students. So the community is really coming from, you know, a lot of the places in South Carolina, you know, virtually. So we're really impressed with the, you know, the amount of individuals that are still involved, because it was supposed to be face-to-face in the spring, but we have 75 people registered right now. So please join us.
It's great. Is registration fee? Is there a registration fee?
No, it's free. It's free.
Awesome. I'll repost the information on our Project E3 website and send it out by email in case anyone's interested in participating. We'll get that out to you. Thank you, Cassandra, for sharing that. Any final thoughts, John Walsh?
No, I think if folks come up with any additional ideas you would like us to do for the Leadership Academy version 2, please just email us. We're going to be meeting as a team, the Southern team, and John Connolly from CSAVR and Robin, the UA Currents team. We're going to be meeting next week to start talking about some of the preliminary planning for this. So please, you know, if you just have some brainstorm ideas, just jot them down, send them to us. We have been in communication with our project officer at RSA to keep him up to date of what we're doing. And we, you know, it's just important to get your feedback. We want to make sure that the content, and thank you for answering the survey. First of all, the survey information you provided us was excellent. I think in particular, as Robin had mentioned, we're looking for topical areas that relate in particular to sustainability. So anything that you see in your state or you would like to get more information on, just let us know.
Thank you. Absolutely. Email us. We'll be happy to incorporate your ideas and suggestions in the second version of our Leadership Academy that will be all virtual. Our next meeting is September 24th. So we're looking forward to continuing the conversation then. Until then, we thank you for being with us and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Take care, all.
Good luck, Robin.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.